Here we have a problem that was submitted by a student, and so again, I think it is well worth us going over, especially because of this completing the square idea. Okay, so here is our question, and actually the correct answer, but we're going to figure out how to get there. So when we complete the square, the first thing that we always need to do is we need to move our constant term over to the right-hand side of the equation. So by doing that, we'll have 2x squared plus x equals 1/2. Now we can never ever complete the square if we have a number in front of our squared term. So we have to get rid of that first. The best way to get rid of that would be to divide every term by 2. And instead of dividing by 2 when we work with the fraction, that's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So here we would have now x squared plus 1/2 x. Now I'm going to leave a spot to finish completing my square, equals 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. And now we begin completing the square. So in order to complete the square, what we're going to do is we're going to add a number in here that will cause this to be a perfect square trinomial. So our procedure for doing that is this middle term here, what will be the middle term anyway, we're going to take half of that. So that 1/2, we're going to take half of it, which would be the same thing as multiplying by a half. So half of a half would be 1/4, and then we square that number. So 1/4 squared would be 1/16. Now by taking half that middle term and squaring it, we force this to be now a perfect square trinomial. But if I add 1/16 on one side, I also have to add 1/16 on the other side in order to keep that equation balanced. Now we factor. Now the beautiful part of factoring now that you've completed the square is it will always be your variable and then that halved amount. So half of 1/2 was 1/4. So this will factor into x plus 1/4 equals 1/4 plus 1/16. We'd have to get a common denominator, which would be 16. So this would be 4/16 plus 1/16 would be 5/16. And now we can apply the square root property. Taking the opposite of the square, we would have to square root both sides. So this would be x plus 1/4 equals, when we take the square root of this fraction, we'll have a positive and a negative. Square root of 5 we can't do anything with, but the square root of 16 is 4. Now we're almost done. We're going to subtract 1/4 from both sides to get x all by itself. So we'll have x equals negative 1/4 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 4. Now I put that 1/4 in front instead of behind so that we didn't confuse maybe it with being underneath the radical later on. Now because these are common denominators, we can put them together. And remember, we've got two separate equations here. So this would be x equals negative 1 plus square root of 5 all over 4. Or x will equal negative 1 minus the square root of 5 all over 4. So here are our two answers. And that matches up exactly with what they have as the correct answers there.